Today, I want to dive into 5 things that I've realized are actually not my job as a parent. And these are 5 things that actually tend to create a lot of tension in the relationship that we have with our kids and tend to make our life so much harder than it needs to be. Hi, it's Anna here. Welcome back to my channel, the best place for parents or educators who want to learn and evolve with their children. Somewhere along my journey toward becoming the parent that I wanted to be for my kids, and let's be real here, a much calmer and respectful parent, I came to realize that a huge part of parenting is actually mindset. And by that I mean that our perspective is everything when it comes to how we respond to our kids and what we focus on. And on this journey, I also realized that the first step is about unlearning everything I thought I knew about children, discipline, and my role as a parent. It's about unwiring the neural circuits that I have in my brain that really aren't serving me or my kids, and rewiring them to something more conducive to a connected and joyful relationship with them. So today I want to tell you about 5 mindset shifts that I've made about my role as a parent that have really helped me become the parent that I want to be. And you will see that if you can make those shifts, it will free up so much mental, emotional, and physical space for you so you can breathe and make this parenting ride so much more enjoyable. Please also let me know in the comments what you think of them and if they are helpful. And also if you have more to share, I'd love to know. So let's start with the first one. It is not my job to make my kids happy. This one was very tricky for me, and I think it's tricky for a lot of parents because we have this innate desire to protect our kids, right? And also, let's be real, when our kids are happy, life is so much easier. But there are 3 problems that I see with this. And the first one is that it's virtually impossible to make our kids happy all of the time because we aren't actually responsible for all of their needs. There are a lot of needs that our children have that are completely out of our control, like friendship, for example. So when you think that your job is about making your kids happy, you end up running on a hamster wheel, doing all the things and chasing an impossible goal, which is ultimately going to leave you miserable. And also, when you do this, you are attaching your own feelings to your kids' feelings. You are only happy if your child is happy. And this is a recipe for disaster because we all know that nobody can be happy all of the time. So it's a completely unrealistic expectation. And here is the actual parenting paradox. The more you welcome your child's negative feelings, the happier they will be. The second problem is that when you distract your child, those negative feelings don't just disappear, they get bottled up. And the problem is they need to go somewhere. So you can think of it as storing a corrosive substance in a plastic bottle. They may be able to contain it for a while, but they will be adding to it every day, and at some point it needs to be released. So this is when your child will, out of the blue, become so upset about the smallest thing that you end up thinking, what's happening to my child? Because those emotions need to be released at some point. And of course, it's inevitable to bottle things up. We all tend to do it from time to time. And especially when they go to school, they will be bottling a lot of things. But let's make home a safe haven where they can release their emotions. The last problem that I see is that when we focus on making our children happy all of the time, we actually rob them of some very important resilience building experiences. Because life will inevitably throw challenges at them. So our job is to equip them with the skills to be able to handle those challenges. You won't always be there to protect them, and this becomes so apparent when they go to school. You literally cannot control when they have issues with their teachers, schoolwork, or friends. And it's through dealing with conflicts with us, their parents, and their siblings that they get practice at building those skills that they need. The resiliency skill, problem-solving skills, flexibility, and communication skills. Ultimately, we need to understand that we're not trying to raise happy people, but whole people. So what is our job then? Our job is to help them make sense of their emotions, name them, validate them, and support them through it. This is how we will raise people who can feel and process their emotions. The second one is that my job is not to entertain my kids. And this one is very closely linked to the first one because we entertain them to keep them busy and happy, right? But there are three major problems that I see with this. The first one is that we end up shooting ourselves in the foot because the more we entertain them, the more they become dependent on that entertainment. By keeping them constantly busy and entertained, you actually rob them of the ability to entertain themselves. And you also don't leave much time for you to recharge. Your needs are also important. The second one is that it's so important to let our kids be bored. They need to become comfortable with boredom because, like the author from this book says, boredom is a precursor for creativity. And I highly recommend you watch the video summary that I did because it provides a lot of strategies on how to simplify our kids' lives so we can create space for boredom. Children need time to themselves so that they can switch off from the outside world and have time to daydream and find their interests and gifts. Often it's through this boredom that they may find their passion. And that white space of doing nothing is so important to balance our energy in this fast-paced and busy world that we live in. I'm sure you can relate to this as an adult. So it's even more important for our kids who are so little still. They need a lot of time for free play, but they can't do that if they're constantly busy or entertained or driven from one activity to another. And free play is actually very therapeutic for them because this is how they release some of the internalized emotions that they've bottled up, as we discussed earlier. And last but not least, this is also how they discover and develop their sense of self. How do you know who you are if you never have any quiet time to yourself? And knowing yourself is a precursor for self-confidence and self-esteem, which are such important qualities to thrive in the world. Children are actually born curious and creative. They have a very vivid imagination, so we shouldn't rob them of that creativity. So what is our job then? Our job is to make sure that they have plenty of time for boredom and free play. And when they inevitably come to you complaining that they are bored, all you have to do is to simply acknowledge that by saying something like, "You're bored, it's hard sometimes to know what to do." And leave it at that. You do not need to fix it for them. And trust me, they're not going to be happy about it. I know I've got 3 kids and they don't like it when I say that. But guess what? It's okay. They always find something to do. The third job that I want to discuss is that it is not my job to fix all of my child's problems. And there are 2 main things that I want to discuss here. The first one is that when you rescue your child from all of their problems, they won't actually be learning the very important skill of finding their own solutions to their problems. And as I mentioned before, challenges are an inevitable part of life. So the best thing that we can be doing for our kids is to equip them with the very important skill of problem solving. And they do need a lot of practice with this. So next time there is a problem, try to start a conversation with your child to help them identify the problem and ask them to come up with solutions themselves. And you might be surprised, but in my own experience with my 3 kids, they've actually been able to come up with amazing solutions themselves. And because they came up with the solutions themselves, it's also a lot easier for them to implement it. And if you need help with this, I highly recommend you watch this video. It's an amazing framework that goes step by step on how to have this sort of problem-solving discussion with your kids without feeding them the information, which is very hard to do when you haven't never done it before. The second point is that it is through experiencing these challenges and resolving them themselves that they will become more resilient human beings. And I'm sure we can all agree that being resilient is one of the most important skills to have in this day and age. And also, they will become more confident as a result when they realize that they can always come up with solutions. This is also how you teach them to develop a growth mindset. The fourth job is that it is not my job to be my child's friend. And this one is closely related to wanting to make your child happy all of the time. And to me, this one comes from being really uncomfortable with setting and holding boundaries. And there are 2 main problems that I see with this. The first one is that children absolutely need boundaries to feel secure. You may have heard of the concept of secure attachment for children, where research has proven that it leads to the best outcome for them. But children can't feel safe and secure without boundaries. If you don't have boundaries with your kids for fear of breaking the connection with them, for example, they will feel insecure. Children need both emotional connection and boundaries. One doesn't go without the other. They go hand in hand. The second one is that when you do this, you aren't preparing your child to live in the real world. In the real world, we all know that we don't get what we want all of the time and we can't be happy all of the time. It's just part of life. So when you are raising your child this way, they will grow up to be not emotionally resilient and crumble at the first point of struggle. They will view themselves as victims of their circumstances instead of trying to be more resilient and to focus on solutions. In this book, the authors put the parent's role really quite well. They say that we should be bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind. We are not our child's friend. Our child is not our equal. Our child is still immature and they need us, the parents, to be in charge. They need the help of the adults to help them become responsible adults themselves. And we do not need to be authoritarian parents to hold limits. There is a way to become a much calmer and more confident leader. And in this book, they also explain why some of us parents really struggle with holding and maintaining boundaries sometimes. And it has everything to do with how we were parented ourselves. So I highly recommend you watch the video. What really helps me with my kids, especially when I'm getting really strong reactions from them against some important limits in our house, hello screen time, is that it is my job first and foremost to keep them safe, not to keep them happy. And that really helps me to stay confident and not get swayed by their very intense reactions. And last but not least, the fifth job is that it is not my job to control my kids. My job is to guide, support, and teach them so that they become responsible adults. This one was very hard for me, and it's hard for a lot of people because most of us have been raised in authoritarian homes where we were heavily controlled. So we have inherited these patterns, and we tend to view our role as parents as the one that needs to control our kids' behavior at all costs. But the problem is that this form of control really comes at a cost. It comes at a cost to the connection that you have with your child. And the thing is, you may be able to control them now when they are a toddler, but how will you control them when they are teenagers? So isn't it a much better use of our time to focus on teaching them intrinsic motivation? And by that, I mean that I want my kids to do things because they want to, not because they have to. And of course, don't get me wrong, I totally understand. Believe me, I've got 3 kids. This takes a lot of patience and persistence. But it is so worth it. And so what I do, of course, I still hold boundaries about brushing teeth and, eating at the dinner table. But I always explain why we do these things. I really do believe that explaining the rationale behind why we need to do certain things in life is so important for our kids. It actually gives them a sense of control and autonomy, because when they understand why we do certain things, they actually want to do them. And I've seen that with my kids. They always strap themselves so good in the car now, I don't have to tell my 7 or 5-year-old anymore. They always brush their teeth. So it might be that sometimes it's so hard and you just want them to do it in that moment, which is fine. But just make sure that you explain to them later on why we do these things. And the thing that I've realized as well is that whenever I've gone down the controlling route, and believe me, there's been so many times because I've been learning a lot. I used to be so strict with routines, food especially, and screen time. And the thing is that it actually robs them of their autonomy and their willingness to do it, to listen to me. Because what ended up happening with food, for example, is that they were sneaking food away or, asking their friends at school to swap things in their lunchbox. So it really doesn't have the desired effect anyway. So you really want to teach them why they want to do these things. Intrinsic motivation is so important. And overall, really, in order for them to become independent and autonomous, we need to build a trusting relationship, not a controlling one. That's it for today. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please leave me a like if you have. And please, I'd love to know if you have more to share or what you think of this video. Thanks for watching and keep growing.